Welcome. I'm Jane, a member of the League of Women Voters Juvenile Justice Working Group. We typically meet the first Wednesday of the month at 9 a.m. Our Juvenile Justice Group seeks to learn what elements might be designed to create, support, and sustain social justice. For several months, this League of Women Voters group has invited guests to speak on juvenile justice, whether about kids involved in courts, whether a student is suspended from school, or whether a kid is involved creatively with Washtenaw, My Brother's Keeper. We seek to be more educated about the kids in our county and the difficulties some face. Before I introduce our speaker, Terrence Williams, I wish to tell you more about the League. The League of Women Voters of the United States is a nonpartisan voter education organization encouraging informed, active participation in government. It's the League's position that voting is a fundamental citizen right that must be guaranteed. The Washtenaw County League does not have an official position on today's topic, but provides this forum for voter information. It is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Terrence Williams to our Juvenile Justice Working Group. Before this spring, Terrence Williams was a major player at the Youth Center, part of Washtenaw County's Children's Services. He was youth attendant there, providing trauma-informed direct care of the detention home residents. At the Youth Center, he developed I Read to track reading goals and encourage literacy. Now, since April, Mr. Williams will speak about his work at the Washtenaw County Racial Equity Office. Washtenaw County's Racial Equity Officer is Elise Asbury Payne, and Terrence is Equity Program and Community Engagement Manager at her office. Terrence tells us that one initiative in this office is in cooperation with the San Francisco Financial Justice Project. As in San Francisco, our county seeks to reform court fees, court costs, including exorbitant phone calls, commissary purchases, and other costs for those incarcerated. We hope to hear about other initiatives and projects in this office. Terrence, thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Unfortunately, the video did not start immediately. The first question posed by Harvey has to do with how quickly the youth is able to appear in the courtroom.
In the facility before they actually came into the courtroom.
Oh, okay, so each kid is seen within 24 hours of placement. If there was police interaction before 5:00 p.m., the youth would not be brought into the youth center. The youth will go straight to the courtroom and they would sit before the bench and they would be heard then. If there was a police that picked them up after business hours, they will be seen by 3 p.m. the next day, the next business day. If this was something that happened over the weekend, there were Saturday morning hearings that happened. And if they were picked up on a Sunday, they will be heard on Monday morning. And so we did our best to make sure that they were heard as quickly as possible. And so that was the protocol. And so there was another question from Suzanne.
Yes.
Susan?
So Terrence, I was wondering about the center itself.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, what is a holding? It's like a holding cell they're in. Are they alone in that cell? Are there bars on the walls? Does it look like a jail? What is it? What does the space look like?
Okay, so Washtenaw County Youth Center is a 42-bed facility. It is a co-ed facility. So there's 4 different pods of 10 bedrooms in each pod. In these pods, youth are kept separate at all times when staff are not present. And staff are present for all youth interaction. And so when people oftentimes are thrown aside by the co-ed concept, but we learned that kids are a little bit more, it's a little bit more manageable when you have them together. They enjoy the interaction, and you get less issues. And so they're never alone with each other without staff presence. And so there has not been any issues in my time at management that came up. And so we thought that, and we still do, most youth centers in Michigan are co-ed facilities. County ran youth centers are co-ed. We are also a part of the Michigan Juvenile MJDA, Michigan Juvenile Detention Association. And so there is a lot of collaboration between detention centers in the state of Michigan. In Washtenaw County, the current administrator, Kevin Mitchell, is the treasurer of this organization and is very involved. Lisa Greco, past department head, she was the chair of that group at one point. And so this group has definitely been influenced by the work in Washtenaw County and is often a resource for collaboration and a thought partner. So we do rely on them heavily. But as for the youth center, it's a 42-bed facility. 4 of those beds are 24-hour monitored rooms. 2 of those rooms are next to our control station, which is where you have a person who is watching cameras, who is monitoring the entire facility and making sure kids are safe and staff are safe. In the youth center, go ahead, Jane.
I just wondered if there's a common room, like a basketball gymnasium or any those kinds of things that are available, and if your work involved helping them play basketball,
So in the youth center, there is a gym. It's a fully like everything you would think about in a middle school gym, you would see in that space. And so I'm sorry, I just have to log in. I have my notes here and I don't want to lose those. Okay. We use that space, so staff are preparing recreational instructions for the youth. They are doing games with them. They're keeping them active and trying to make sure that they are just staying fit when they're in the youth center. Oftentimes, the youth center brings in more of a sedentary, sitting, watching TV. And so we like to get the kids up. There are also 2 courtyards that have gardens that we have partnered with Michigan State's Extension, the Master Gardeners Program. And they come in and they garden with our youth and they teach them about agriculture. They teach them about, just how the ecosystem, how everything plays into each other. And they also harvest the vegetables that they've grown. They make salsa, they make all these different things with the vegetables they have, and then they eat it. And so that relationship has been great because you have a group of people who have been educators. Most of them are prior educators. We've had teachers from Chelsea High School, teachers from Dexter, Ypsilanti High School that have participated in this program. And it's a nice moment for, our young people to learn and glean from those who may have walked in their shoes at some point and or are educators. And so that program has been nice. During COVID, the pandemic, that was one of the programs that we limited access to the building for the safety of those people, but also for first and foremost, our youth in the youth center. We did not want to bring in more people to, make them a higher risk for contracting COVID. And so a lot of these different programs are starting to become a thing. What we did do, there were some virtual classes that were happening still, but we learned that there was a lot of virtual time that these kids were spending on the computer and they were not enjoying that. And so we did move to more staff programming and eliminate some of the virtual programming because they were on school all day on a virtual platform. It was just a lot. And to stare at a screen for that many hours as a young person, that could probably get a little frustrating. My high school years were not spent on a virtual platform, so I could only imagine. Yes, heck Harvey.
So in March of 2019, when you moved to technical staff support, after 5 years as a youth attendant, were there changes that you wanted to bring to the office when you came in from your 5 years of experience?
Yes, so great question. So if I can go back a little bit, during my time as a youth attendant, one of the things that helped management identify me as a leader in the organization was the development of our IRE program. During my time as a youth attendant, I wrote up a proposal to our director at the time, Lisa Greco, to start a program called IRE and help young people gain literacy. And it was an incentive-based program to stimulate reading in the youth center, and it took a lot of time to build it out. This program was like I said, incentive-based program, but also staff were doing it with the youth, and so this was something that the staff enjoyed as well. But youth will receive coupons to purchase things from store as they completed books, and we built out I had a team of staff who volunteered to help me with this program. But we read the books, we made quizzes for books, it was a lot of work that went into it, and our director at the time got behind that work and made sure people were compensated for their work and that it wasn't just something they were asked to do on their own dime. And so very appreciative for that time, but that was one of the moments that helped me kind of be seen in a more leadership way. And so during my time as a youth attendant, there were definitely areas that I wanted to see change. For one, that was hiring and recruiting, how we hired and recruited staff and personnel in our youth center, how we trained those staff to work with the youth in the youth center. And so in my transition to management, I went into infrastructure management, contract management, kitchen management, and crisis intervention trainer. And so as a crisis intervention trainer, a lot of that responsibility of first contact with new hires is, you're training staff the moment they walk in the door, and you're shaping the way they do their work. And so we teach that a person in crisis knows at some point that they're, something's wrong. They feel something's wrong, but they don't have the mechanisms to internally to be able to deal with that crisis. And so as solid objects, we want to create a space for the youth to grab onto us, and we support them through this crisis. And that's the framework that we work from. And so in this training, we like to keep it trauma informed. And so understand that these kids come from a experience that we may not be able to understand, but walking through them with through this process, and not looking at them as as an aggressor, but more so as a victim, like they're dealing with some heavy stuff here, and trying to help them navigate through this experience. So so in my transition into crisis intervention trainer, these were some of the things that I wanted to make sure were heavily talked about subjects. We wanted to get it in their heads early. And then this is not something that just happens once a year. We train our staff 3 times a year, 1 full certification, which is an 8-hour day. And then we do refreshers twice a year. And then also we have an open door policy on any questions. And I'll pop in occasionally at shift exchange, like when different shifts are coming in, and interact with staff and just ask them questions and different things like that to keep them thinking about the crisis intervention. And so in crisis intervention, we teach also that in the earlier signs, so tension is generated by either anger or fear. They understand that either a kid is angry or the kid is fearful. And so at that moment, they'll begin to pour off and show different behaviors that will help a staff identify if that kid is experiencing that tension. And what that may look like is pacing the room, increase in speech. You'll also may see a regression in participation. So where a kid may have been very talkative and involved in the group, you may see this kid start to regress and not talk as much. And so how do you intervene at these moments? And so we start with support. It's a moment where we start to show support. We lean in, we say, what can we do for you? How can we help you? Is there something you need? Oftentimes a kid hasn't experienced that type of support before. So their response is get away from me. And we listen to that, right? We say, okay, we'll give you your space. And so that's the moment for us to back off. But we do let them know that we're here if they need anything, and let us know. And so if this does increase, the behaviors increase and it starts to escalate, we move into limit setting, and we set the limit, we establish a limit, and while also showing support. So we teach support never stops. I don't care if it ends up in a physical restraint, the support doesn't stop. Because as I said earlier, we're a trauma-informed organization. And so we understand that a youth being grabbed could take them back to different experiences and different moments in their life. And so you have to make sure they understand and are supported through this process. With that being said, in 2021, we had 8 restraints in the entire year. That is a credit to our staff and the work that they do. And I will say, like, most issues, like, it is not a facility that doesn't have issues. You know, kids are upset, they're dealing with heavy things, they're being told they're going home. When they show up to court, they're not going home, and they come back to the youth center a little bit irritated. And so you have moments where youth are very frustrated, but the staff's ability to build relationship and engage youth are second to none. And 8 restraints, I mean, that's phenomenal compared to other organizations across the state of Michigan. So just to give you all an understanding of who we're serving and how many youth we're serving in that facility. In 2021, there were 68 youth for total. So, like, we've seen a very dramatic decrease in youth detained as well due to the pandemic. The court made a decision that they were not going to detain any youth that were like that in the past we had detained for safety reasons, but they made a decision to not, you know, expose these youth to COVID and different things like that, that they would do their best to treat them outside of the youth center. And so that mindset has carried into 2022, which is awesome. But so you had 68 total youth that were detained in 2021. What we do see is a little bit of recidivism. Of those 68 youth, you had 111 total admissions and 103 released. And so this is over the span of a year. Of those 68, 50 were African-American, 16 were white, One was Hispanic and one identified as 2 or more races. We serve kids ages 11 to 17. There was one 11-year-old, one 12-year-old, 7 13-year-olds, 13 14-year-olds, 20 15-year-olds, 14 16-year-olds, and 12 17-year-olds. And of those 68 youth, 53 were male and 15 were female. And so those numbers still remain true today. It's the same demographic that we're serving with a slight change, but it's still the same. Carolyn?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt the flow, but so I always have trouble with the whole system. So who's determining, so you said there's a hearing within 24 hours, is that correct? And who is the hearing with? Is that actually in the court with the social worker and a public defender, or who is in the courtroom or at the hearing?
So a youth is, so prior to COVID, we would do in-person court hearings. It would just be that we would transport our youth down to the courthouse, and they would sit before the judge in a traditional court hearing. So with them would be their attorney, if it be public defender and or a hired attorney. It would depend on the family's arrangements, but they would go with their probation officer present if they were placed on probation prior to that, sitting before the bench, and their attorney. Our staff will be there as support and for safety, just to make sure youth were safe and families were safe. And yeah, so those are the parties involved. Oftentimes they would have a social worker that has been working with them that may show up as well. Student Advocacy Center oftentimes would show up as support. So it would look different for each child.
Okay, and I'm from Friends of Restorative Justice, and a number of years ago, we did a court watching project, and we were mostly in the juvenile hearings. And at that time, they were still being shackled. Is that true today?
That is not. We transport them with shackles, but before the bench, they are not seen with shackles or cuffs. They are taken off in the room behind as they walk in. They are wearing collared shirts with khaki blue pants. This is something we also wanted to see change in my time being. So I've seen a transition from going from jumpsuits to collared shirts with khaki pants. And so I think this plays a big role in how everyone sees that kid. I mean, you see a kid in a jumpsuit versus a polo shirt, that has a different effect on the eyes. And so I think that would be a great change. But to answer your question, they do not go before the bench in iron shackles and cuffs. Go ahead.
On that, you said that before the pandemic, these hearings were always in the courtroom and then it went virtual. Where is it at now?
So I believe they're still holding virtual hearings. It is taking place in one of the rooms in the youth center where we would hold our Saturday hearings. So they will come in. It's all being held virtual still. Yeah, and that is where we are today. I don't know where the future will find that, but it is being held in the youth center. Sure.
Two other questions, and then I'll be quiet.
That's okay.
So I'm wondering if you have any had any interactions with the Dispute Resolution Center and the Peacemaking Court. You know, how does that fit into that? And then the next question, of course, is your role now, as that's since April, correct? You know, how are you seeing what your job now is to change that so we don't don't even have that court anymore, but I mean, I'm being a little facetious here, but you know, what's that relationship? So I have those two.
Yeah. Can you repeat the first question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we work closely with the Dispute Resolution
Oh.
Center to do, you know, restorative justice or peacemaking circles, that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering how you saw that, if you did.
So we actually contracted the Dispute Resolution Center so I also sat on the committee for our diversity committee, which we designed and brought in different organizations to facilitate diversity trainings for our staff. Dispute Resolution Center was one of those entities that came in to speak with our staff, equip our staff, and work with our staff. That has been one area that we have partnered with the Dispute Resolution Center. I would like to see more happen. I know that, so through wraparound services, there has also been some participation there with CMH wraparound services. I also supported that work as a youth attendant. We'll partner with probation officers to support the wraparound service. So CMH probation officers, parents, teachers, so like educational supports would show up in the space. We would work on a plan to help them be more successful in the community. And my role in that was to share different experiences that we did to help the youth kind of work through their day. And so for an example, we had a young man who was told like he had a really hard time settling in class. And so what something that I had done with him during my time as youth attendant was we would wake up earlier than everyone else. We would go down to the gym and we would do a workout. So he would work out before his class. Once he got to class, we learned that he was able to sit a little bit longer. But we also worked into his daily programming where he would have time to get away from the class, go have some personal time, and then come back. And so we contracted WISD for educational services in the youth center, and they are very accommodating to those needs. They do all the IEPs and different things like that. And so it functions like any other school. And I say that with reluctantly because they're being detained, but they do a really good job at providing education to those youth that are in the youth center. And we have also seen some graduations happen because of their work. In the last few years, there have been quite a few kids graduating. They will partner with their high school and make sure that they were able to still graduate while going through their situation that they're working through.
Did you say you contracted with WISD for the classes?
Yes, so WISD is the contracted education provider.
Could you give me a name or two of anyone over there?
Yeah,
At the
Holly Hevlin, she would be your main contact for that program, I believe. But yeah, she works very close with the detention center for educational services. So a little bit more about the demographics. So there are some charges that were charged to the youth, but I do want to highlight a few. In 2021, we seen, because of the charges we were taking, we were only bringing in violent offenders. And so in 2021, 26 domestic violence, 12 of those were motor vehicle driving away unlawful use, 8 were armed robbery, 3 were unarmed robbery, 16 were stolen property, receiving, concealing motor vehicle, and then 11 were weapons carrying concealed. And so these were the youth that were being detained in 2021. We did not take youth that were having a hard time on probation. That wasn't the use of our facility during that time. And so it was strictly around making sure kids were safe and their families were safe. That was the work the detention center was doing, and it's still doing today. We're seeing more violent crimes coming in than anything else.
So I'd like to go back to that first encounter. It's the police that are having an interaction with the youth, and they have to make a decision. Do I take this kid to the center, I presume, or do I take this kid home? Or they're making a decision in the field. And yes, once they're at the center, within 24 hours, the court is gonna, especially if it's after hours, the court will hear it. But I'm interested in that period before the court gets involved.
So I do want to clarify, sorry to interrupt you. I do want to clarify that the police are not making the decision. So what happens is that our staff are contacted by the police in the field. This police lets us know the name and the information of the case with the youth. They say, we have this youth, this is what they've done, this is their name, and I would like to place this youth. What happens next is our staff supervisor on duty, or we call it designated person in charge, DPI for short. This person would contact a on-call referee. The on-call referee will hear the matter and make a decision if this is reasonable. Is this a reasonable question? And they will work through, well, does this young person have a family member they can go to instead of being incarcerated? Do they have, if it's a domestic violence situation, or if parent is unable to provide care, those are the first steps. Do they have a family member that they can go stay with until we hear them tomorrow? What is the situation? And they get more in-depth conversation. We're on a 3-way call with them. And then if the decision is to bring them in, we make sure we have appropriate documentation when bringing them in. So when they come. So oftentimes that is the process. There's also a moment of, if a kid is on an active pickup order, this means that they are not cooperating with their probation and they picked up another charge. And so police have found them in the community, they've done something else. If they have an active probation case and they have a pickup order on file, the youth center can detain them on that active pickup order.
So I'm impressed that you have this on-call referee available. How long has that protocol been in place? Do you know?
That has been in place as long as I've been there. Yeah, that's been the process. The on-call referee, no matter what time of night, they are answering the phone. I've had to call referees at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and they always answer. And in the event they don't, we contact another, and someone hears the matter. We cannot detain any youth without the first go ahead from the referee.
And is this on-call referee an employee of the court or an employee of the detention center, or who?
These are Washtenaw County referees. So these are the people you will see every day. Like, these are your referees that hear matters on a daily. So, and a lot of times they do have prior knowledge just due to the frequency of the youth that we encounter. And so they do have more understanding of who they're talking about oftentimes.
I realize you might not know this, but I was still wondering who employs them. Do they work for the court, or do
Yes.
they work for the detention center of the county, or who's their employer?
Washtenaw County. Washtenaw County, they work for, I believe it's Judge outside is the chief and the family court. And so they report directly to her.
Thank you.
Yes.
So Terrence, how about the prosecutor's office? When are they called in? Because you're saying that the referee can almost determine whether it's a case to go forward, or the child could stay home?
So that goes a little bit beyond my knowledge.
Okay, okay,
That's more the court process.
okay,
But what I do know from a detention standpoint is that when we show up to court, they have a full report from the police department, and they work from that lens. And so,
well, I guess what I'm trying to follow up on Susan's question, can that referee decide that this child should not go to the hearing, or that's not that broad a prerogative?
so when they make the decision to detain them,
Yeah, can they say, no, this child shouldn't be detained at all,
yes,
we're just sending them home?
they can make that decision.
Okay, okay. Wow.
They are the ones who make that decision. I was just using that to clarify that the youth center nor the field officers make the decision to detain the youth.
Yeah, okay.
But I would guess if this officer, this intake, what do we call it, on-call referee decides, nope, take the kid home. So the police do that. The police still have to file a report about the incident because they were engaged. And then would it not be the prosecutor's office that would look at that report and decide if there's going to be any more action or not?
That would be my,
You still might have a case going through the court, even though you're not in the detention center.
mhm. And that's a little bit, so like I don't know all the
It's not
process outside of what we do in our youth center. And I don't want to speak ahead of that, but that makes sense to me. That does make sense to me. Harvey?
Your bio leads off with this fascinating phrase, and I'm sorry to turn it away from exploring your experience to the concept of strategically disrupting systems. Can you, before we run out of time, get a sense of where you're looking to do that?
Yes, sir.
How difficult will that be, and how much support do you need to develop to do that?
So I would say in the development of the racial equity officers, the Board of Commissioners and the county administrator has shown their support to seeing that happen. But in my work specifically, in my work at the youth center, what that meant was changing the way we thought about, working with kids and incarceration. What does that mean? Are we looking at them as the problem, or is it the situation that they're faced with? What that also meant was the hiring and recruiting. Who are we asking to do this work? How are we asking them to do this work? We have been able, even in this tough time, they continue to bring on amazing staff who are doing great work over there. And so that was one of my babies, just in that work, was making sure that we were bringing in the right people. And so I enjoyed doing, while it became very draining at times to sit in so many interviews and work through things, and people say, well, what am I applying for here? What is this? And so I would just remind them that this is one of our most vulnerable community members. And so we want to make sure we have the right people in place to work with them.
Can I ask you about the numbers? How many total youth attendants are there, and the total number of people in the Washtenaw County Children's Services overall? Do you have an idea in general?
I cannot speak to who's currently, like what their current structure is. Well, I can speak to the structure, but I can't speak to vacancies and different things like that. But the youth center you have one youth attendant on every shift, and you have 5 youth counselors on day shift and afternoons daily. On the midnight shift, you have 3 youth attendants on that shift. You have so you also have support staff. We call them management support staff, but that is our youth home coordinator. You also have a fiscal specialist. You have a management analyst, a program manager, an operations manager, and a director. You also have a full-time mental health specialist or mental health professional that works there. And this is a CMH employee that has been contracted to work in our building and provide that mental health support to the youth center. And so that was one of those strategic areas that our organization also worked through, because it helped the continuum of care of youth that were entering back into the community that did not have prior connections to our community mental health. And so they were able to work with these youth that in the past may not have had the opportunity to work with.
Can you tell us the name of the new youth attendant who took your job after you became a racial equity officer?
I think the latest one that came after me would have been Muhammad Kandi. And he went to take the role of a youth counselor now. So he's a youth counselor. And so he's working in that capacity. And yeah, so he's the latest, he's the more recent one. And he comes from he worked with as a parapro for many years in the school system. And and that's actually how we came to know. Well, I've known him since he was a young guy. We playing coaching based basketball and different things. That's also how I've made connections to the community. I'm from Ypsilanti. We kind of jumped ahead, but I'm born and raised in Ypsilanti. Went to school, Ypsilanti public schools, and then in my high school years, my parents moved to Lincoln area, which is where I graduated from, Lincoln High School, and coached from little league baseball all the way up to college basketball. And I know I'm still young, but I've had quite a few experiences. So yeah.
What's the goal? What's the goal for the coming year? You've been at the office for 6 months. What's the next year? What's your goal?
My goal is to support this Finding Feet Justice work with the build out of the Boys and Young Men of Color achievement work that I've been working on. This is one of you talk about interrupting systems. This is one of those things that I think is really going to help interrupt systems. I think building out opportunity for boys and young men of color is going to help the county as a whole. I think if we could get behind, this group of people who are our highest incarcerated, who are our lowest graduating, I think if we can get behind this group of people, we will be able to see Washtenaw County improve in many different ways. So trying to lift the achievement of African American or boys and young men of color, so Latinx, African American, like I'm looking across the board, not just young Black boys, but boys of color as a whole. Is there anything else we missed on? I know that we could have talked for a couple hours here, but I'm making a lot of transition. We've had a lot of different things coming, even from my family. This Jane knows we've we've had a third child, and so our youngest is 7 weeks tomorrow.
Oh
and
my.
We have a 3-year-old, and we also have a 4-year-old who has learned to zip her coat. So as you may know, getting ready for school in the mornings is delayed quite a bit because she has to zip her own coat. So we are, I'm learning as I'm going, enjoying it, but I also have a great support system here. My wife, she's amazing. She keeps the house moving. She keeps me supported so that I can do the things I do in the community. And without her, it'll be tough. So I appreciate her more than anything. Yeah, so super excited about the work in the Racial Equity Office, everything, and the support that has been given, and just making sure I'm ready for this work. with Administrator Greg Deal, my racial equity, the racial equity officer at Lee's. They've been really pouring into me in different ways. We were able to take a site visit to San Francisco, where we learned a lot about this finding fee justice work. We've also had the San Francisco team come out to us last week, and that was also a good experience. They shared a lot. Treasurer Jose of San Francisco, he came with the team. He shared with our staff here at Washtenaw County a lot of how they did the heavy lifting. And so it's been very strategic in how we get this work done, and everybody's been involved in the conversation. So I'm super excited about this.
I thought it was interesting that when COVID came, there was a shutdown. We're only going to put kids in the youth center if they have committed some kind of crime that would, or I don't know, crime is the wrong word, some behavior or action that's considered violent.
Mhm.
And that as a result, only 68 youth were detained in that facility in 2021. And then also everything's gone to virtual for the court hearings. So these are changes that sound like they are continuing. I'm wondering, as you think about how things were pre-COVID and how they are now, are there some good things coming out of this? And are there some things that you hope return to the old way?
So working through also how the community violence has affected Ypsilanti as well, and how we work through that. And so when you remove I use this loosely, but when you remove a tool, what do you replace that tool with? And so we haven't detained youth. So what does intervention look like now? How do we work with these kids that are in the community and are facing this violence? Like, how do we make sure we can still interrupt violence without detaining youth? This is going to be the question I hope to work through over the coming year as well, is building out what that looks like. We have some amazing community workers out there doing work, like Supreme Felons, who's doing crisis intervention. Talk with Adam at A Brighter Way, doing reentry services. Like, it's you got some really great people out there doing really great things. But how do we make sure that these opportunities are taken advantage of by our community? Not to say I'm coming in to fix things, but just make connections to different industries, kind of show where things can be brought in and support other areas that we've kind of walked away from. So I think that's going to be one of those areas. I think a lot of great things are coming out of this, but we're going to have to be thoughtful of how these changes have impacted the community as well.
Anything else, Harvey?
I'm thinking about 68 during the year. So what was the maximum number on average?
Oh, so we hit a time when,
How full were you?
and so I do want to bring attention to the fact that it was 68 youth, but when we talk about these 68 youth, when we highlighted the charges that were being committed, these are typically charges that are held for a longer period of time. And so prior to the pandemic, our average length of stay was 7 to 14 days. That changed in 2021 because we were dealing with more severe cases. And so we seen a peak of maybe 15 youth in the youth center at one point for a pretty long time. And so it got really low at times as well. But I do want to bring attention to, like, when you have these more severe crimes, these youth are typically with us for a little longer. And then also MDHS, there's a shortage of state beds out there for youth to transition to in the event that they find that they need to be treated a little bit, a little more. And so when they go off to, their residential treatment facilities, for CSC crimes or different, anger management, training, they go off to these residential treatment areas and they're being served, but there's a limited amount of beds out there for these youth to transition to.
I'm sorry, I was actually thinking about this in a different way. That 68 seems like a lower number than it was pre-pandemic. Is there any danger that the county will decide to cut the budget because it's a smaller number and they need to put the money someplace else? I'm always worried about budget issues.
Yes, I got you, Harvey. So to answer that question, I don't know where people's thoughts are. What I will say is there have been other areas who have regionalized detention. And so, which means that they would contract out detention services to other nearby counties. The danger in that is from my perspective, the danger that is you put a strain on families. So families that are already less, they're not communicating, they're not interacting. You put more of a barrier between these families to build those relationships.
Basically, you feel that the county's support for the budgeting process to keep this going and making progress is solid.
I hope that's the case. If it's not, that we have a strategic plan in place to work through that as well. But from my seat, I have seen regionalization of detention work, and that is not the answer. That's not the solution. And maybe there's another solution that I'm not seeing. But I would hate to see our families become more divided, from that solution.
Great. Well, we certainly thank you for your time this morning. You've been very generous with us, and you've helped us understand so many things that we're full of questions about that youth center. We find it a locked space for us, and we really, really have appreciated what you've shared with us. We also look forward to future at RC at Racial Equity Office, and we know that the county is busy making sure you get funding, and we want you to have great success with the programs that you initiate there. So good luck to you. I congratulate you on your achievements and your awards so far. So I know that will continue. But thanks for this morning.
And to the group, I would like to offer the opportunity to do a tour at the youth center, if that's something that you would like to do in the future. We could organize a tour and informational session with the director there. Really great friend of mine, great guy, and I think he'll definitely be open to that. So
Wow,
we could organize that as well.
Would we contact you?
Yeah, you can contact me, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
thank you, Terrence. That's
right.
just great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, and take care.
Hi.